Hi there, Substack friends. Welcome. This is Hugh Smiley, and you're most welcome to another edition of the uh, Hugh's Corasomi Substack. And this is a fairly new channel, a couple of months at the most. And we have some blogs occasionally, weekly, and an interview now and then. And today I have a most interesting guest, Phillip Lindsay, who is a world citizen and definitely a student of life, to say the very least, a student of humanity and history and many facets of our human experience here on this planet, in this solar system and galaxy. So there are a lot of different subjects that we could talk about, Philip, but we'll touch upon a few today, a couple at least, and probably keep the time together to about half an hour, and then maybe at a later date we'll have a longer session. So welcome, Philip. I'm so excited to have you here.
Likewise, Hugh. It's great to be here. Thanks.
Mhm. So where to start? I guess one question that I ask almost everyone that comes, because just because I'm so interested, um, my own spiritual journey is fascinating for me, of course, and likewise
Hmm.
the way other people come to believe or to experience the worldview, Weltanschauung, that people acquire gradually or all at once in the life path. And so maybe we could start with that to prime the pump. Is there perhaps something in your life when you were young or older that kind of pivoted you in a certain direction as far as your studies and your you might say your how you situate yourself in regard to philosophy, religion, spirituality, esoteric teachings, whatever.
hmm Yeah.
So,
Um, well, the first thing I can recall is around about the age of 5 years old. I had a lot of psychic experiences,
oh,
which I didn't really understand until I was much older, until I started to study the wisdom teachings. And so I've always had that intuitive sensitivity. And when I was about 21, I went to a party in Australia, and the host of the party uh, was quite intuitive and was doing readings for people, and just off the cuff, just in a friendly kind of party sort of setting.
right.
And I said, do me," and she blew me away with telling me all about my life, my family, stuff she couldn't have
Mm-hmm.
possibly known,
Mm-hmm.
and through the lens of astrology. But she mainly
Okay.
used just basic astrology, just as a platform for her intuition to work.
Right. Right. Uh-huh.
It was extraordinary. So I raised my beer glass that night and said, I will study astrology seriously one day.
Aha.
And I never thought anything more of that for about another 10 years,
Wow.
still living the rightist lifestyle as I was in Australia.
Wow.
And after my first Saturn return at the age of 31, I remembered that exclamation I made at that time. And so I went into a local bookstore in Sydney, in Australia, to buy one good book on astrology. And I went in the morning and I was in there all day, and I walked out with a huge box of books at the end of the day and sat down and proceeded to teach myself astrology. This is about
Mm.
1985.
Okay.
And that led to about a year later starting to do readings for people, linking up with people, with groups of individuals uh, into astrology or the esoteric teachings and so forth. And then gradually in the 90s, I started to get interested in all of Blavatsky's work relating to the root races and cycles. So
Mm.
I thoroughly indexed all her writings according to various themes and cycles: root races,
Mm.
geography, initiation, astrology, etc. And then in about 2003, when I was in New Zealand, I sat down for about 18 months and wrote the first volume of Hidden History of Humanity.
Mm.
Um, in fact, in 2000, a few years before that, I wrote my first two books, Masters of the Seven Rays and Shambhala Impacts, in 2000.
So if I could just slow you down a bit, may I jump in?
Yeah.
There are a couple of things that you mentioned
of course,
with your Australian accent too, that people may not have.
Okay.
Go ahead. The first thing you mentioned, a Saturn return. Do you want to just like real briefly mention what that means?
The Saturn return is when you truly mature as an adult. Your first Saturn return between the ages of 28 and 30.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just after my Saturn return, you could say that I woke up. Relatively speaking, of course, we're all still asleep at some level or other.
Of course. Yeah.
And that led me to a whole bunch of inner experiences for a solid couple of years that I was guided by, and also the beginning of the study of astrology.
Right.
So.
And that usually occurs around the age
thanks
of.
For reminding me about the Australian accent.
Yeah, no, it's quite delightful actually, but not everybody twigs onto it. So the Saturn, as I understand, that it takes about 29 years, more or less, for Saturn to go around the Sun in its orbit. So when it comes back to the exact position where it was when we were born, then that's the return of Saturn, and it's a time of dealing with life, basically. I guess the issues that we have, maybe that we haven't dealt with up till then, or okay.
It's about the fully fledged integration of the threefold lower self, or personality, as we call it.
Okay.
Mental, emotional, and physical. Which goes in 7-year cycles leading up to the Saturn return. 4 times 7 is 28.
Right.
And then you become a more mature entity. More independent from the family, and the next 7-year cycle leading to the age of 35 is where the soul, generally speaking, starts to appropriate that relatively integrated personality and starts to work through it more specifically. Of course, it happens at a younger age for some people, but that's PK indicates this, the Tibetan indicates this in the Alice Bailey books of that I base my work on.
Interesting. So, yeah, when I was from 28 to 35, those were the years I was in South America, and definitely it was during the discovery of Chiron, and I was definitely studying different mystical paths and chanting and the Kabbalah and all that kind of stuff. Then you mentioned the name Blavatsky. It would be Helena Blavatsky. Could you just briefly let people know who that was and what her significance is?
The famous and infamous HPB, as we call her, Helena Petrova Blavatsky, who was an amanuensis for the Masters of Wisdom back in the late 1800s, where she wrote The Secret Doctrine, Isis Unveiled, and many other books. And that was essentially a plan from the Great White Brotherhood to alert humanity that they existed and that they would be returning soon amongst humanity for the first time since the ancient days of Atlantis. So Blavatsky gave out a lot of wisdom through those books, but for many people it's very difficult material to understand because it's very dense, it's very esoteric, it's veiled in many ways, so it's not to be taken literally sometimes.
Yes.
And it can take quite a bit to untangle it. That's why many people tend to dismiss it and write it off as a bunch of rubbish.
Interesting.
And also dismiss Blavatsky as a charlatan and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, right. Well, that time of the late 1800s was really a time of change where some people who were not having fulfillment or satisfaction through the traditional organized religions, we'll say Christianity in Europe and maybe other ones as well, were starting to investigate. There were the Theosophists and the Rosicrucians, and in the early 1900s as well. So I've heard it said that somebody wrote that Blavatsky was sort of the progenitor, would you call it that, of the New Age, what we now call the New Age teachings, because after her came a whole series, sequences of different spiritual teachers and esoteric schools and so on.
Mm.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I was first introduced to you through the Hidden History of Humanity, which is a long, I think, two parts on YouTube, which people can access. It's an amazing history of the human race and the planet Earth going way back, like millions of years, tens of millions, hundreds even. Um, it was just
Mm.
a mind blower, really, because some of those ideas I had come across in my study of Hinduism and so on, the yugas,
Mm.
the Satya
Mm.
Yuga,
Mm.
but the
Exactly.
way
Yeah.
the amount of research you put into that and art in the images, and it really impressed me so much. And that was one of your first big projects, right?
Yeah. My main two projects are esoteric astrology and the hidden history of humanity. So
Okay. Hmm.
that video is now in just one 2 hours and 37-minute documentary. It's
Okay.
not.
Yeah.
It
Uh-huh.
was originally released in two parts. So,
Yes. Right.
and it's got about 10 different translations now by people, not machine translations, but by
Yeah.
students of the wisdom
Hmm.
who have translated into Chinese,
Right.
into all the European languages mostly.
Hmm.
So it's available on my YouTube channel.
Hmm.
But uh, and it was originally called The Hidden History of Humanity. It still is, of course, the video, but the book came out before that in 2005. But that was extensively updated in 2017 to coincide with the release of my updated of the video. Um, and it was called Unveiling Genesis: Mysteries of the Root Races and Cycles. It was relabeled, retitled. But now I'm working on a third and final re-edit where it's going back to the original title, The Hidden History of Humanity,
Okay.
Volume 1, because I've got Volume 2 in the pipeline at the moment.
Oh, really? Wow.
And yes, it draws on the Hindu tradition particularly because the
Yes.
Vedas and so forth are the oldest
Hmm.
scriptures upon the planet,
Hmm.
on the Tibetan tradition too, of course, and and of course the Blavatsky's masters who were transmitting to her were especially Moya and the Master Kutumi were in Hindu bodies when they were working with Blavatsky, and maybe they still are. So so a lot of my work is re-establishing correct chronology in human history. That's why it's called The Hidden History of Humanity. But I'm trying to, uh, you know, I have great joy and feel very privileged to be able to share this information, to unpack the complications and of the complicated material of Blavatsky and bring it into a more understandable form. So the updated book is about 700 pages with quite big diagrams and explanations and so forth that makes it easier to read. So if you want to go into for a deeper dive after watching the documentary, then it's there.
Well, we'll add under
Yeah.
the video, both here on Substack and also when it migrates to YouTube.
Mm.
We'll put a couple of links so people can access your work. So I have a little question.
Sure.
When we talk about history, our sense of history these days is very limited. Most people we're just about aware of the last 100 years. We'll talk about in American history. We talk about Clinton, maybe, and Bush, and back to FDR, was it? But or at
Yep.
the most, we talk about the last few hundred years. European history, perhaps Bach, Beethoven. But very rarely do we go way back, like a few thousand years. We know a little bit from the Greeks, and the Hindus and the Chinese, but we don't know much about it. We don't inform ourselves, and we don't reference it. But you go way back. We're talking millions of years. So I'm just wondering, what is it if someone were to watch your video and read your book and present themselves with these possibilities of evolution and different rays, as you're talking about, and stages and unfoldment of root races? What could a modern person gain from this that would be significant or helpful in their life, dealing with everyday life? And there's a lot of stuff to deal with currently.
Well, the first thing I would say is that for the individual to entertain it as a reasonable hypothesis,
Okay.
and that it may be capable of proving itself through reading the whole book or watching the whole video or reflecting on it for a few months, years, or decades. Um, and of course, esotericism, or the ageless wisdom as it's called, is not everyone's cup of tea. It can be a steep learning curve to understand some of the tenets of spiritual philosophy. But just in the sense of entertaining a longer timeline for the development of human beings and development of consciousness, essentially, is the key factor. And one good example I give is all the brilliant researchers who do work on the pyramids and lost civilizations and the megaliths and so forth,
Yeah.
who do great work, but they still stay within a 6,000 or 12,000 or 25,000 year limitation. And their work is very valuable. I watch their videos and read their articles a lot, and I know a few of them as well personally.
Yes. Have you met this
however,
fellow? Excuse me.
Many of them.
There's a fellow called Jeffrey, somebody from England, I think, he's pushing it back a little bit. The place in Turkey, he's saying that it doesn't go back just 10, 12,000 years, but there are signs. We have actually archaeological sites now that show that there were civilizations beyond 10, 15, even 20,000. Do you know the one I mean?
Yeah. No, I'm not sure of his surname, but it rings a bell. But suffice to say, the more and more videos I'm watching lately, people are saying this must have taken much longer to develop, either in terms of human beings, in terms of architecture, in terms of ancient technologies and so forth. It must have, we didn't just suddenly come, as Joe Rogan said on an interview I saw the other day, from being primitive cavemen to full-blown civilization and sophisticated nations.
Yeah.
So, and one of the things I point out is that there have always been primitive, quote unquote, civilizations in tandem with the advanced civilization ever since the ancient days of Lemuria, 18 million years ago, which is when human consciousness was first activated, if you like. The seed of mind was planted in humanity, and we've been evolving consciousness since then, which reached one of its high points in Lemuria, actually, and in Atlantis. But we also lost a lot of those technologies through the misuse and abuse of them, which humanity now is discovering again, but off their own bat, and not in terms of them being given gifts like children, as a child is given a gift. So it's interesting to see that, and this is what's so exciting now about these recent finds. Underneath the Khafre pyramid, the middle pyramid on the Giza Plateau. It's been a sensation in the news for the last week.
Yeah, I've seen that 2 or 3 places.
It may actually veil the hidden library that's supposed to be under the Sphinx or nearby. So, and this happened right on the what was it? I think it was right on the equinox, actually. The Aries equinox, that the news came out more generally to people. So it's kick-started the news cycle with a bang.
Yeah, I've seen some depictions of that going down 2 kilometers, I think, at least, underground, underneath the pyramids, these coils.
That's right.
Well, very exciting. So this idea of a certain percentage of humans who are developing their consciousness one way or another, and then another group that are still relatively primitive, not necessarily living in caves, but consciousness-wise, it really feels, to me at least, that on the planet today, if you had to really oversimplify it, there are 2 groups. One is like wanting to evolve and open up and bring people together and awaken and these kinds of things, and the other group is trying to close things down and contain a lot of fear and contain things. And there seems to be a real tension between these two dynamics. I just wonder if that's something that you were referring to has always existed when there's like more enlightened people and more primitive people, or what's happening now on the
I see
planet?
it I see it more varied into several groups actually.
Okay.
But what's occurring now in terms of the dichotomy in civilization are those who are still anchored in the Piscean age and those who are aspiring and receiving the energy of the Aquarian age that's more forward thinking. And so there is a tension conflict between those two groups, and there's a group in between those two. There's about three main groups, I would say, in this overlap or cusp of the ages.
Yeah.
And so this is what we're seeing in terms of the forces of materialism of the past Piscean cycle and the forces of light who are embracing the Aquarian emerging paradigm. So that's kind of a general way of putting it, but I could go into much more detail as I do in my writing.
What would be that third group that you alluded to?
Oh, the group in between,
Yeah.
who are a bit lost and confused, you could say, who are pulled by one group to the past and pulled by another group to the future.
Okay, right.
But I think what we've seen in the last few years is a incredible awakening take place since 2020, and all the restrictions and lockdowns that occurred spurred a lot of people to really start asking much deeper questions.
Yes.
And receiving much greater understanding as a result of that.
It requires a lot of courage as well as education. Baha'u'llah, who is the founder of the Baha'i faith, he said to the Baha'is, you are the twilight generation. You have one foot in the old world order and one foot in the new. So you have the benefit of sort of understanding something of both, but at the same time it can be very challenging. That pulling, as you say, between the attraction of the material world and all its beauty and diversity and the spiritual principles. So just for those, I know a lot of people who may be watching, astrology may not be your cup of tea, but it's a pretty amazing science, and it's coming into its own again now with science and as well as philosophy and intuition. But that term esoteric astrology, what is it that makes this particular approach to the science, I'll call it a science, esoteric rather than exoteric or traditional?
Well, broadly speaking, exoteric means outer and esoteric means inner. I think literally esoteric is for the chosen few, which sounds a bit elitist in some ways. But I guess, one of the things I've always seen is that if people are not ready for those teachings, then they're not ready. You can lead the horse to water, but they may not want to drink. But I think we're seeing an incredible acceleration of consciousness now, and people are thirsty, very thirsty for higher spiritual knowledge. So yeah, what was the original question again?
Well, what would it be that distinguishes esoteric astrology from exoteric or traditional astrology?
Oh yes. So
excuse me.
Yeah, occultism is a similar word to esotericism. Occultism is the study of that which is hidden.
Yeah.
But quite often, unfortunately, I see, particularly in Christian broadcasts, a lot of people referring to the occult being a negative black magic kind of thing, which it is part of. The occult teachings can be used selfishly or unselfishly. And I keep on making posts to various podcasters or broadcasts that I see to just alert them to the fact that when you use that word, don't brand it just in one meaning. So, but that is the difference. And so, exoteric astrology is the astrology of the personality, and esoteric astrology is soul-centered astrology. Right. And so, when I do a reading, I attempt to cover both areas. The sun sign, for instance, represents the personality. The rising sign, determined by the time of birth, represents the sole purpose to develop in any one given
Mm.
incarnation.
So, for example, my rising sign, ascendant in my natal chart is Pisces. Does that mean I'm part of the old, receding age of materialism, or what would be the goals of my soul goal?
Yeah. Well, it all depends on where a person is in terms of their unfolded consciousness on the path.
Right.
So what I said as a blanket kind of statement about those stuck in the old age and so forth doesn't necessarily apply to anyone who is a Pisces sun or rising sign. So Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac, and it incorporates many of the meanings of the other signs in many ways. And so it's a water sign, and water relates to the emotions and the astral body, as it's called in occultism. So Pisceans are typically very sensitive, quite often psychic, super intuitive, intuition being a higher correspondence to the so-called lower psychism.
Right.
And so a person who has Pisces rising is developing that sensitivity. But also, when you take in the rulers of the sign, Jupiter and Neptune, the god of the waters, who rules over the fishes, is most appropriate rulership, but they're the exoteric rulers. And so where you look at those in the chart and by house, sign, and aspect, that will tell you a little bit about how the Pisces soul purpose potential is unfolding. But when you look at the esoteric ruler, if the person is sufficiently unfolded to respond to those frequencies, you're looking at Pluto.
Right.
Is the sole ruler of Pisces, and Pluto was discovered at the end of the Piscean age, or officially discovered, because it's been around for a long time, obviously. And Pluto is the destroyer, the one who destroys the tie that binds the two fishes together in the sea of matter.
Like Shiva,
which allows
Hinduism?
Yes, you could say that, or Kali.
Kali.
I often relate Pluto to Kali, the goddess Kali. And that breaking down of form allows for a bringing back together, but in a non-dual way, in a way that brings about integration and synthesis. So Pisces rising people, I find, because of this Pluto rulership, are very similar to Scorpios, which is another water sign,
right,
co-ruled by Pluto. And what both Scorpio and Pisces have in common is an ability to be a kind of exorcist, to be like a shaman that mediates between this world and the other world. That I know Pisces people, when you're in their presence, Pisces rising people in their presence, stuff will come up. That's what Pluto does. It brings up stuff from the Pluto's underworld and makes you aware of it.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure whether you have that capacity, but I have noticed it in Pisces rising people.
Well, I'm a therapist, so
yeah, that's just a small vignette.
That'd be interesting. Well, I have my moon in Scorpio, so it's got the both of them working together there. And I've been
you got a good combination there.
And I've been a psychotherapist for many years, so it comes in handy sometimes. Well, just out of interest, since we're talking about
you do the voice dialogue too, yeah?
That's right. Yeah. Well, authentic voice and developing the.
Do you have any Gemini in your chart?
Absolutely. Yeah. The IC Uranus conjunct and the in Gemini and Mars as well. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Gemini's got a lot to do with the voice.
Absolutely. Yeah, and communication. So, in your own case, if you care to share, based on your own rising sign, how would that fit in with what we've been talking about your path and your interests and your service, your goals of the soul, in this life?
Well, I'm a Leo rising.
Ah, great.
I have Leo rising with the Sun in Libra, and the Moon in Virgo.
Yeah.
So, esoterically speaking, well, just generally, Leo has to do with leadership. Yes. Esoterically, it has to do with the will to illumine.
Right.
Leo is ruled by the Sun.
Yeah.
So illumination is the key factor there. And there are some parts in esoteric astrology under the chapter of Leo that I really resonate with in this respect. and essentially that's what I do. I have a Virgo moon that I call the wordsmith. So I love writing. I have
Right.
many different books that you can find on my website.
Yes.
And I have a Libran sun, which helps me to keep the balance, or to keep to keep from polarizing to one extreme or another. I'm not always successful in that, but so when you interpret the rising, doing a horoscope, when I'm doing a reading for a client, I look at the rising sign and the exoteric rulers first, and then the esoteric rulers. So that helps me to. I keep applying that, and my techniques keep growing and changing over the years. So a chart that I interpreted 10 years ago, I probably interpret differently, or with some embellishments today.
We're always growing and deepening. Well, I'm very impressed, by the way. I thought there must be something that you have, whether it's a coping strategy or part of your personality even, or your soul qualities, but because I see you, this is the first time we've really talked one-on-one, but I participated in some of your classes, and I've watched, you have a newsletter, an amazing newsletter that covers what's going on in the world, and the books and the meditations online. And I'm just impressed by how you are able to keep it all together and still come across as a pretty normal person. So you must have some, maybe the Virgo and the Libra together. The Virgo gives you that ability to categorize and organize, and then the Libra is the balance, I suppose. But you do an amazing job, and it's very inspiring, I think, for others. And is there anything that, just before we wind down, I mean, we could talk for hours, I'm sure, but is there anything else you'd like to mention, or if people want to follow up a little bit, and what would you like them to have access to regarding your work?
Well, just commenting what you said about how I do it all, and is you bring in the rays. So I've got strong seventh ray of organization in my makeup, and that ray comes through certain signs. And I have other rays, like the first ray, very strong, the second ray. So the rays, the study of the rays, is called esoteric psychology, but esoteric astrology is essentially is inextricably entwined with the science of the seven rays. So people can read more about that at my website on esotericastrologer.org.
Yeah, I've got that written down.
And on my YouTube channel.
Okay.
I'm about to make a 40 class course available on YouTube soon, which I'll announce in the next newsletter for Aries in a couple of weeks.
Wow.
It was the one that you attended, I think. You attended part of it.
So it's going to be the recordings from that training available online, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, that was great. Ooh, that covered so much. Yeah.
There was 40 classes as a basic primer or foundation of the Ageless Wisdom.
Yeah, exactly.
Including, of course, all the monthly meditations for the last 3 years are available for free, but the course will be by donation, and I'll announce all those details. So I have those places that people can go to find out more if they want.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Phil. And speaking of donations, I forgot to mention earlier, here on Substack, most of you are free subscribers, and those who have picked up a paid subscription, I appreciate that very much. If you like my work or want to support it, you can upgrade to a paid subscription, just a few dollars a month, actually. And we will be back with at least one blog a week and one video of some kind, training video or interview. And I'm so delighted to have you here, Philip, and hear just a little smattering, a little taste of your rich work and history, and hope to have you back again.
Likewise, Hugh. I look forward to it. Thank you.
Great.